It sounds backward at first. You spend years trying to reach a number that lives in the American imagination like a private gate code. 250,000. $250,000 a year. The kind of income people picture when they imagine breathing room. Finally, enough. Finally, margin. Finally, a life where saving money should become almost automatic. And then people get there. And somehow it doesn't. Not the way they thought. The surprise is not that high earners spend more. Everyone knows that. The real surprise is how many people cross into that income range and feel, quietly, almost insultingly, that saving money has become harder than it was when they made less. Not impossible. Harder. That feeling embarrasses people. It sounds decadent. Tone deaf. Absurd, even. How could someone making $250,000 a year struggle to save? What kind of person says that out loud? Usually, the kind who doesn't say it out loud. Because this is one of those financial truths that hides behind polished kitchen islands, airport lounge memberships, and very competent-looking marriages. It hides behind clean driveways and good school districts and the kind of grocery bill people stop checking line by line. It hides in people who are, by every visible standard, doing well. And still, late at night, opening the banking app with a strange mix of disbelief and irritation. Where is it all going? That question has a different texture at this level. At lower incomes, the answer is often brutal and obvious. Rent. Food. Utilities. Childcare. Debt. Life. The story is pressure. The math is blunt. But after 250,000, the story becomes more psychologically interesting and in some ways more dangerous. Because now the money is being consumed not only by needs, but by identity. By proximity. By the atmosphere of a life that's silently inflated around success. That's the trap. People assume higher income solves the saving problem. Sometimes it does. But often what it actually does is upgrade the environment in which the saving problem lives. It becomes more socially acceptable, more elegantly disguised, and much harder to interrupt without feeling like you are moving backward. A man gets promoted from 130,000 to 260. On paper, this should feel transformative. In theory, he now has the power to build wealth aggressively. In reality, within a few years, the house changes. The neighborhood changes. The expectations change. The vacations stop being scrappy and start becoming restorative, which is another word people use when they've become too tired to fly cheap without resentment. The car becomes less about transport and more about what it would seem to say if it didn't match the rest of the life. Nothing happens all at once. That's important. Almost no one wakes up one morning and says, now that I earn more, I will construct a more expensive cage. It happens gradually, with reason attached to every decision. A better school district because the kids deserve it. A larger house because everyone is always on top of each other. A cleaner, safer area because peace has value too. A more reliable car because time matters now. A nicer vacation because work has become relentless. A private lesson, a club fee, a summer program, a cleaner, a meal service, better healthcare, better flights, better furniture, better everything in just manageable increments. Each decision makes sense by itself. That is why the total becomes so hard to challenge. Because the total is built out of individually defensible choices. And then one day the household income is impressive, the lifestyle looks enviable, and the savings rate is still weirdly thin. Not because the people are foolish. Because they are surrounded by expenses that no longer feel optional. They feel like the maintenance costs of becoming who they worked so hard to become. That is the deeper reason saving money can get harder after 250,000. At a certain level, spending stops feeling like indulgence and starts feeling like continuity. You are not just paying for things. You are paying to keep the story coherent. There is a subtle emotional violence in upward mobility that nobody talks about clearly enough. We act as if earning more simply gives people more freedom. But higher income often relocates people into more expensive social ecosystems. Different streets. Different friend groups. Different assumptions about what normal looks like. And normal is expensive. Not luxurious. Not obscene. Just relentlessly upgraded. At one salary, a birthday party means pizza and folding chairs. At another, it means catered trays, a rented venue, party favors that look suspiciously like professional branding, and a silent fear of appearing cheap in front of people who all seem to be taking this in stride. At one salary, a family vacation is a break. At another, it becomes memory architecture. Something emotionally loaded. Something that says what kind of parents you are, what kind of life all this work is supposedly for. At one salary, a home is shelter. At another, it becomes location, school access, resale logic, social belonging, and an ongoing referendum on whether you are doing as well as people assumed you would. This is why saving can become harder even as income rises. More money enters the frame, yes. But so do more meanings. And meaning is expensive. There's another reason this becomes especially difficult around the 250,000 mark. That level of income often arrives after years, sometimes decades, of delayed gratification. Graduate school. Professional ladders. Long commutes. Late nights. Risk. Exhaustion. Missed time. Private sacrifices that no one sees once the paycheck looks good. By the time many people reach that income, they do not feel greedy. They feel owed. That feeling changes everything. Now the expensive dinner is not careless. It is earned. The hotel upgrade is not wasteful. It is deserved. The nice neighborhood is not excess. It is the visible return on years of invisible strain. The spending becomes emotionally protected because it is connected to an internal moral argument. I did not work this hard to still feel restricted. That sentence lives in a lot of high-income households, whether anyone says it or not. And it makes saving harder because saving, at least in the short term, can feel like disrespecting your own struggle. It can feel like continuing to postpone the life you thought success was finally supposed to unlock. So people do what smart people often do when caught between discipline and desire. They compromise in ways that look responsible. They save some. They spend more. They assume they'll optimize later. Later is where a lot of wealth quietly dies. Not in collapse. In drift. Because the problem at this income level is rarely ignorance. Most people making this kind of money understand the basic ideas. They know they should be investing. They know taxes matter. They know lifestyle inflation is real. They know the math. But knowledge doesn't automatically outrun environment. Environment is stronger than theory. If everyone around you lives in a way that constantly redefines comfort upward, your own spending stops registering as extravagant. It starts feeling calibrated. Reasonable. Even restrained. That's the eerie part. A household can be earning more than 90% of the country and still feel merely normal within its immediate world. Not rich. Not extravagant. Just in the middle of what everyone else around them seems to be doing. This is where income becomes deceptive. Because the absolute number is large, but the reference point has moved. The people you compare yourself to are no longer the national median. They are your neighbors. Your colleagues. The parents at school pickup. The couple from the lake house weekend who casually mention renovating a property you forgot they even owned. So your inner standard changes. And once your standard changes, saving begins to feel less like a rational habit and more like a social deviation. Not openly. Quietly. You hesitate before saying no to the trip. You wince at the cost of the dinner, but still go. You keep the larger home because downsizing would ask questions nobody has asked you directly, but you can already hear them. You continue paying for the lifestyle not because you love every part of it, but because exiting it would feel like a public statement. At lower incomes, scarcity can be harsh but clarifying. At higher incomes, the danger is blur. Blurred lines between comfort and performance. Between need and identity. Between enjoying your life and financing a role inside it. Then there are the fixed costs, which are rarely discussed with enough honesty. People imagine high earners swimming in discretionary money. Sometimes they are. But often what actually happens is that a large income gets attached to equally large recurring obligations. Mortgage. Property taxes. Insurance. Tuition. Childcare. Car payments. Travel for family. Support for parents. Support for adult children who are technically independent but somehow still expensive. Professional wardrobe. Social obligations. Healthcare so expensive it feels like a luxury subscription to your own survival. When fixed costs rise high enough, even a big income starts to feel pre-spent. And when money feels pre-spent, saving requires friction. Real friction. Deliberate refusal. The kind that can make a person feel, strangely, poorer after success than before it. That's the psychological paradox. The person earning 60,000 knows there are many things they simply cannot do. The boundaries are obvious. The person earning 250,000 can do almost all of them. Just not all of them at once. That creates a uniquely dangerous illusion. Possibility without true abundance. Enough money to say yes often. Not enough to say yes casually forever. So households begin living in a zone of high capability and low margin. From the outside, it looks enviable. From the inside, It can feel like a machine that requires constant feeding. And the people inside that machine are often too smart to call it what it is. Instead, they tell themselves some version of the same story. We're in an expensive phase. Once the kids are older, things will ease. Once the house is paid down, we'll save more. Once this promotion lands, we'll catch up. Once this stressful season passes, we'll tighten things up. But a phase can become a decade very quietly. A decade is enough time for massive income to pass through a household like water through polished hands. And there is one more reason saving gets harder after 250,000, maybe the most uncomfortable one. Success often upgrades your tolerance for waste. Not dramatic waste. Refined waste. You stop caring about small leaks because there are larger inflows. You round upward more often. You pay for convenience because your time feels expensive. You solve friction with money. You reduce discomfort with subscriptions, services, better versions, faster routes, quieter hotels, shorter lines, less hassle. Individually, these purchases often make sense. Collectively, they create a life in which saving no longer happens naturally. It must be defended. That's the shift. Below a certain level, saving feels like discipline against limitation. Above a certain level, saving becomes discipline against softness. Against convenience. Against status. Against the emotional logic of reward. Against the private feeling that after all this effort, you should not still have to think this hard. But wealth has never cared what feels fair. It responds to what remains. Not what was earned. Not what was deserved. Not what looked impressive from the driveway. What remains. And this is the haunting thing about high income. It can create the appearance of financial power long before it creates the reality of financial freedom. A person can look wildly successful and still be structurally dependent on the next paycheck because the life wrapped around that paycheck has grown thick and hungry. That is why some people become richer and feel less secure. Not because they're delusional. Because they accidentally built a life with a high burn rate and a strong emotional attachment to everything fueling it. The way out is not austerity theater. It is not pretending that money should never improve your life. Of course it should. Otherwise, what are people working for? The way out is seeing the difference between enjoying a larger life and becoming the employee of your own lifestyle. That line matters more than most people realize. A larger life gives you options. A hungry lifestyle consumes them. One expands your future. The other keeps sending invoices. The people who save well after 250,000 are not necessarily less tempted. Often they are simply less enchanted by the symbols. They can enjoy nice things without requiring those things to stabilize their self-image. They can feel successful without proving it continuously. They understand that every upgrade, however reasonable, has a shadow cost measured not only in dollars but in future flexibility. And flexibility is the thing high earners quietly lose first. Not income. Flexibility. The ability to step back. To change careers. To take a lighter role. To survive a bad year without panic. To let the investments build instead of raiding every surplus for a better present. Once flexibility is gone, a big income can start to feel eerily similar to a fragile one. Just with nicer packaging. That is the secret nobody at the top of the dinner bill wants to say too plainly. Sometimes the hardest people to convince to save are not the poor, not the reckless, not the uninformed. It is the people who finally have enough money to make almost any ordinary desire feel reasonable. Because reasonable, repeated often enough, becomes expensive. And expensive, normalized long enough, starts to feel permanent. So yes, saving money can get harder after 250,000. Not because the math stops working. Because the psychology changes. The environment changes. The meaning of spending changes. The cost of saying no changes. By then, the threat is no longer simple scarcity. It is seduction. A polished, intelligent, socially validated seduction that whispers the same thing over and over in more sophisticated language. You've earned this. You can afford it. This is just what life costs now. You'll save more later. And if no one interrupts that voice, if no one looks at the beautiful life and asks what it is quietly consuming, then the years pass, the income stays high, the image remains intact, and the actual wealth never arrives in the way it was supposed to. Because in the end, earning more money does not automatically make saving easier. Sometimes it just gives your excuses better taste.